Hey, welcome back to Working Class Customs. Welcome back to Stable B once again. Today, we're gonna be doing some simple maintenance. Gonna go do an oil change on the Gixxer. Figured I'd take you guys through that. Walk you through my steps for an oil change. I know it seems pretty simple for probably a lot of you, but maybe there's some of you here that have been taking your bike back to a shop or just barely got a bike, haven't had to do an oil change yet, or maybe you've had the bike for a long time and you realize it's overdue for an oil change. So there's many different things that bring us to that. So I figured I'd do one, show you guys kind of what my process is going through that, and take you guys along for the ride, so stick around. First up, before we get started, if you're liking the channel, you're liking the content, or maybe you're not because you haven't watched this as your first video, one, welcome. Two, make sure you hit that subscribe button, throw a like on the video, and while you're watching, drop some comments if you have any questions about the process, oil changes, track bikes, motorcycles in general, oil, anything like that. Or on the contrary, as always, you guys in the audience that are more mechanically inclined than myself, know a little bit more than myself, you guys catch something I'm doing wrong, I really appreciate that feedback from you guys, so make sure you drop it in the comment below, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so oil that I use in my motorcycle, Castrol 10W40. That's what Gixxer calls for specifically. I use Castrol in like just about everything. That's why you kind of see there's some up there and there's more over there. Castrol goes in that, Castrol goes in that. I don't remember what I put in that, but Castrol's what we like, so that's what I get. Nice because you can order it off Amazon, or I got this from Napa Auto Parts. Now, on to the Napa part. These are the oil filters I use on my bike. Go ahead and hate if you want. I've never had a problem with them, and I can run right down to Napa and get them. The best part is that they're always in stock because no one ever wants them from Napa. I used to run K&N, but supposedly K&Ns blow up, so we run Napa Gold. We'll talk more about that later. Anyway, getting started. First thing we need to do, take this. You see this? Climber Manual Suzuki Gixxer 600 750 06 to 2009 maintenance, troubleshooting, and repair. You're gonna take this. You're gonna do what every guy does, and it's gonna go right down here in the trash. And then let's get started with our oil change. First thing we gotta do is get access to oil drain nut, which will be down here, and oil fill is not hard to get to, but it's on the other side. So I'm gonna pull the belly pan off. What I'm gonna do first is remove this bolt back here. Now, I recognize some of you in the audience might not have a track bike, so you don't have a belly pan. That manual that we just threw in the garbage, if you have one, would you give you exact instructions of exactly which panels you need to pull off the bike? And if you don't want to do that, you can just kind of look at it. Sometimes you don't have to pull anything off. Sometimes you just need one side panel. Generally for sport bikes, it's one side panel. But if you have a sport bike or a track bike, the great part is the race fairings have belly pans. So you can just pull your belly pan off. And that makes that pretty nice. So we'll get this side off of here, and then we'll hop over to the other side and grab that. Okay, as you can see, the belly pan's off. There's our drain bolt. Oh. Right there. And if we walk around to the other side, oil fill cap, that guy. And down here is our sight glass. We need something to collect all this oil in. Oh my goodness, look at that. You're gonna take your oil pan here and you're gonna put it right there under. So when you open that, all of it goes down there. Then you're gonna come over here, you're gonna take your oil cap, fill cap, and with just a little bit of pressure, things are made of plastic, so be careful. You're not supposed to tighten them down so hard. You go ahead and take that fill cap out. And there might be some oil on it, there might not. Set it over there, off to the side. All right, that is important. Don't ever forget to do that. All right, moving on. Next up, we're gonna need to remove the drain bolt so we can drain all the old oil out of the bike. All right, for us, it's gonna be a 17 millimeter. There it is, hard to see, but 17 millimeter. Throw that on there. Just a little bit to break that. Now, here's where professional people on the internet won't have an issue because they won't spill any oil. Or you can just accept the fact you're gonna get some oil on your hands. It's really not too big of a deal, but if you get to the end, or as you get to the end, put some pressure inward, thread it till it's obviously not threaded anymore, and pull out. Then you have minimal oil on your hands. So it's not too bad. You can set that cap right off to the side, and we're gonna let all our oil come out. Drainy, drainy, drain, drain, drain. Okay, so while our oil is draining out, I thought I'd mention, I did this with a cold engine today. Now, I could be very wrong on this, so take that for what it's worth, but I like to do most of my oil changes nice and cold because it gives the engine plenty of time for all that oil that's up and around to come all the way down to the bottom, which means we're gonna get the most out of it. The downside of having colder oil is it's more viscous, so it's gonna not flow as easily, so it will take longer to do your oil change, specifically the draining point right now. So generally, if I'm doing an oil change, I'll make sure I have plenty of time available. I'll come out, I'll open my drain plug up while also opening the top, taking the cap off the fill point. We talked about that, very important. Get to that in a second. But I'll just go inside for a while and just let the oil drain. It's a motorcycle, so it really doesn't take that long, but the same thing goes for a car. Try and let it be nice and cold so you don't get any oil that's hidden up in the cracks and crevices and whatever else. The whole point of oil change is to replace all your old, used, dirty, unlubricable, that's not a word, but it sounds cool, oil with new fresh stuff that's gonna do well to lubricate your engine. So you wanna get as much out as you possibly can. I'll probably negate myself later and be like, this is fine. You can have a few drops of old stuff in there. If you're doing a filter with it, then obviously it's not a big deal. Anyway, that's why I do it cold. On to the fill cap. Taking your fill cap off is very important because your oil system is a pressurized system. So if you leave your fill cap on there and then open your drain plug, depending on how good your seal is, which hopefully it's pretty good, otherwise you'd be leaking oil, your oil could get stuck in there. Now, realistically, there's plenty of other stuff in there that's gonna give you air in, but it'll drain quicker, better, more fully if you just take that fill plug out right at the very beginning. So it's always the first step I do. Guess what I found in my belly pan? One, bunch of rocks. Those are always in there, but two, this little guy. It's an exhaust spring, so I gotta figure out where that one came off of and go put it back on. But that's the great part about a belly pan. Everything gets collected in there, which is freaking awesome. So this is still draining, which again, cold oil, it's gonna do that. Up here is our oil filter. So what I'm gonna do is move this guy sideways. Make sure that's kind of out of the way. Take my oil filter off. Go by hand. I doubt it. Definitely not. So grab our oil filter wrench. That's not gonna work. By oil filter wrench, what I meant was channel locks. Get the channel locks on there, just on the edge, and rotate. Nice even pressure. You're just trying to break the seal of the O-ring in the oil filter. So now that that's pretty loosened up, should be able to get it by hand, sure enough. Now this is the part where you will probably get a little bit of oil on your hand. It mostly depends on how fast you can get the oil filter off of there, but as you can see, I'm never that good at it. So you can either break it and try and let it all drain out, or you can just accept your fate and have a rag on hand. But, you know, pull that oil filter off of there, set that upside down so it drains out, and then go get a rag so you can get all that off. So while our oil is still draining, and it will be for quite a while, we gotta talk about K&N versus the other oil filter brands, and we gotta talk about oil change periodicity. So periodicity is how often we do it. There's the requirement per the owner's manual, and then there's the requirement per your buddy down the street, and then your dad, and then your grandpa, and then someone in the comment section of this video, and then me, and then everything else. So it really depends on what you wanna do and what you think is best. But what I can say is that if you change it more often, you know you'll be okay. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll elongate your engine life, but you will be okay. If you are running your bike at a different level than what the manufacturer expected you to do, i.e. if you have a track bike that you're only taking to the track, you're always running it at its max RPM, you should probably change your oil a little more often. If you're racing your bike, so every weekend you take your bike out of the racetrack and run it at even a higher level than a track bike, probably have a weekend, do an oil change. Have a weekend, do an oil change. Have a weekend, do an oil change. I'd say with a track bike, you might be able to get away with every other track day or something like that. A lot of people like to do every track day just because then you know you're safe and you're good to go, but that's kind of up to you. Out on the street, check your manufacturer, see what they want, go with that. If you have a warranty, maybe some people split in half, some people do like 70% of whatever the manufacturer recommends, whatever that is for you. Figure out what you want to do. At least do what the manufacturer recommends though. If you don't at least hit that number, then you got a problem. But I know like some motorcycles, the manufacturer's like every 6,000 miles. And so you could go, for some of you that might not ride as much as you think you do, you could go 10 years without doing an oil change. If it's been more than a year, you need to do an oil change because the oil just sitting there for that long won't be that good anymore. And it could lose its ability to lubricate and cool. Either yearly at least, most people say every 6 months, that's probably better, or whatever your manufacturer recommends, or if you're racing or doing track days, every track day, every race weekend, or something along those lines. All right, now that we got that out of the way, periodicity is done, let's move on to oil filters. Napa Gold, I told you, there might be some controversy there, hit me with it. I've never had a problem with them. They're cheap, that's what I run on every vehicle I have. Been running this as a track bike in forever, never had a problem. So, I don't know, give me a reason why not. K&N, I've also never had a problem. K&N's sweet because they got that little nut on the front and the nut's got a hole in it so you can safety wire it, which is a requirement for race bikes. They're the only ones with that nut on the front that I know of. And they're not allowed at many racetracks or in most race groups, circuits, whatever you want to call it. So why is that? Well, supposedly, I've never seen it in person, but supposedly K&Ns are known for blowing up, especially if they're not like run in yet or something like that. Usually, apparently, if they're gonna blow up, they'll do it pretty quickly. For those reasons, people have said, we're just not gonna do K&N, and we won't have any problems at our racetrack. We won't get oil everywhere, because no one wants to be out on a racetrack, have an oil filter blow up, put oil all over the track, and basically shut the day down, because now no one else can run because the track's too slippery. Or at least have to go out there with all the de-oil stuff, cat litter, whatever else they might use on racetracks, get it all cleaned up, spend a bunch of money, a bunch of time, ruin everyone's day. So for that reason, we stay away from K&N, and then we just never have that issue. You can see, quite obviously, we still have a couple drippy droppies of oil coming out. Right here, there's, and right there, there they go. So that's okay, it's not a big deal. We're gonna go ahead and install our new oil filter. You have a little tiny bit of dirty oil still in the engine, not a big deal. Now take our new oil filter, gonna take some old oil, just dip your finger, here, I'll do it over here so you can see. And put that on that O-ring. I guess that's not really an O-ring, that's just a gasket. But you just want a nice little liquid seal on there. It doesn't need to be a ton, just needs to be enough so that there's not a dry part of the gasket, so it can seal up good. And then you're gonna take that new filter and screw it on to its spot. I believe oil filters do in fact have a torque spec. Couldn't tell you what it is. What I know is that you don't want to overdo it. So you get pretty tight, give it a little more, and give it just about what your hands will do without a rag or a towel or anything else. And then since you have the oil on the gasket in there, that's gonna form a seal, and it'll get plenty tight. Don't even worry about it. And then after that, since we had an issue where we got a little bit of oil everywhere, I'm gonna wipe off that excess oil. So there's gonna be some on the exhaust, which will burn off better, or will burn off if you start the bike. So it's not like a huge deal, but it's better if we just keep everything clean. That way dirt doesn't accumulate there and everything else. Then we'll take our filler plug after we wipe it off. I just wanna clean everything out of there. There is a magnet in there, so it's gonna collect whatever debris from any wear products that you might have in your engine. Generally, there shouldn't be a whole lot there. If you're seeing a ton of stuff, that's probably a sign of poor engine health. You do want it to look nice and clean in there, but it's okay if there's like a little bit of dust on it. When you pull it out, just make sure you clean it up before you put it back in. And then you wanna take a rag and just wipe that seating surface for your gasket on your filler ring, or sorry, on your drain plug. And you're gonna thread that drain plug back in. Now, as you can see, it was still dripping a little bit. It's not a big deal. Like I said, if you have a little bit of oil in there, it's gonna mix with the new stuff. It's gonna be perfectly fine. You won't have a problem. All right, then you're gonna grab your ratchet with the same socket before and completely disregard anything when it comes to safety, and just guess and stick that on there and just tighten it until it feels like, yep, it's probably tight enough. I'm just kidding. Now, you guys remember that book that we threw out in the beginning? One, if you don't have one of these, might as well go get one, especially if you're newer to the motorcycling world or whatever else, maintenance. But come right here, has all your stuff. So we're gonna go engine top end, engine lower end, chapter 5. Tab out to chapter 5. This is gonna have some very, very important information. Oil, pan, bolt, torque specifications, sorry. Torque specifications, oil, pan, bolt, 10 Newton meters. Sorry, this is America, we don't use Newton meters. 89 inch-pounds, 89 inch-pounds. 89 inch-pounds. Wait a second, that doesn't sound quite right. I've never used an inch-pound wrench before. Oil drain bolt, 17 foot-pounds. Perfect. So, if you have questions on that, you can like go through here, and there's all these cool pictures, all this crazy stuff, and you're like, well, how do I know which one it is? And it'll call it out at some point. But I'm not gonna show you guys all that. The other option, if you don't have one of these manuals, that's fine. You don't wanna overdo your torque on anything. So we do have 17 foot-pounds here. So we're gonna grab our torque wrench and put 17 foot-pounds on our drain bolt. But if you don't have one of those manuals, you can't always just use Google. Google is 100% an option. Google it, your bike, your year, and all that stuff, torque spec. But if you wanna save some money, you're gonna keep doing maintenance on your bike, you might as well go grab one of the manuals because it's save you a lot of time, lots of money, makes it way easier. And then you're not chasing around Google to figure out whether or not you have the right torque spec. Just get the manual for the bike. It'll always be the right torque spec. So anyway, we have our torque wrench here. Let's move this over so you guys can actually see, maybe, hopefully. All right, as you can see up here, foot-pounds, we're looking for 17. So we got a 4 right there right now, which is not gonna work. So looking at your numbers, what I did down here, I'm sure most of you used a torque wrench, so I'm sorry if this is like way too easy for you, but we're gonna go over it real quick. Micrometer style torque wrench. Loosen that up, whatever it might be on the bottom. Yours could be a little different, that's okay. Go until you see a number below the one you want, i.e. 15. If you line your 0 up with the middle, we can see 15 over here. We're now at 15 foot-pounds. We want 17, so we're gonna go 1, 2. Now you can see our 2's lined up with the center here. We can still see the 15, so we know we are at 17 foot-pounds. Now we're gonna lock that in place, and we'll go over and put our torque on our oil pan, oil drain bolt. Real quick, before we do that, I don't want to get a ton of oil on my torque wrench, so I'm going to move my collection pan out of the way. But before I do that, I'm going to wipe off all my excess oil down here, since I did have some drips, and make sure that it's not going to drip anymore after I move that out of the way. And stick that on there. It does ratchet, so you can just kind of ratchet along for a little bit, and then we'll see if we can get you guys that good, sweet, sweet sound. There it was. So hopefully you're catching that movement, and I'm making sure there's no movement over here, so no, I'm not applying extra torque to the bolt. But you can see right here, watch that part break away from the head, and you get that click sound. That is the sound that you're looking for when you're using one of these click type torque wrenches. So the sound and the breakaway feeling, you'll feel it. That's what you want. That's what a click type torque wrench does. Make sure you're always putting torque on your stuff. So right here, also in our manual that we threw away earlier, have our oil grade, 10W40, as you can see right there, and then capacity. So if you're only doing an oil change without changing your filter, 2.3 quarts, oil and filter change, 2.6 quarts, and complete overhaul or completely dry, 3.1 quarts. So you can see there's about a half a quart difference. It's gonna be 2 cups, a pint, whatever you wanna call it, between completely dry and doing an oil and filter change. I'm willing to bet we're gonna be kind of halfway in between there, if not all the way over that 3-quart mark by a little bit today, because we went with cold oil. Over here, that's why you get one of these manuals, is your maintenance schedule. If you come down here, it says every 11,000 miles or 18 months, plus the following: replace air filter, replace the engine oil and filters. That's when you would actually do an oil change. The only other time it talks about oil is over here, every 6 months or 4,000 miles, which is what most people would think. It says change engine oil. So yeah, you do an oil change, but it doesn't actually want you to do oil and filter until the 11,000 mile mark, or every 1.5 years. So kind of interesting. All right. One quick pro tip: don't hit your bike off the stand while you're doing an oil change. But 2, this one, I don't know if you can tell, doesn't have that much in it. So this is my collection bottle. So I'm actually gonna set this right down off to the side, and I'm gonna stick a funnel in it. Scoop. Not sure if you can see that. Yep, you can see just the top of it, perfect. And I'm gonna use that to ensure that as I'm emptying these into my engine, I don't just spill a bunch when I'm putting all these down. So I can, actually I have that all that backwards, sorry. That is gonna stay up on my bench. And once I'm done, all of these, because oil is so viscous and sticky, are gonna have like a film in them basically, and you can collect all that. Or you can just throw them out. You can definitely just throw them out. But I like to collect them all, put each one, just kind of set it on there for about a day. And that's gonna collect in that one can, and then I always have a little bit of extra lying around. So anyway, without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and fill this thing up with oil. So at this point, we have drained our oil, taken our oil filter off, put the new oil filter on, put the oil drain plug back in, and now we're filling this up. Now, our manual said 2.6 quarts for oil and filter change. I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do is put exactly 2 quarts in there, and then wait. This specific bike comes with a sight glass, so hopefully you guys can see that. Let me check. It's gonna tell me how much oil is in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and dump 2 of these in there, and then let it settle out and see where we're at. I don't know if you guys are catching that on the video, but you can definitely see some getting into that sight glass, and now it's looking empty again, which is exactly what we want. That one's good enough. Put it up on there. Need more hands. Grab our next bottle. I don't know if you caught that, but I just used a knife to cut that out, a little seal thing. Yeah, it might be a little bit lazy. You could just rip it off technically. It's so much easier if you use a knife because then you actually cut it. So then you're not getting stuck behind your seal and whatnot. You're actually just cutting it all completely off. You never have an issue. Knives are worth using. All right, we're gonna take our second quart. Like we said, once again, the manual said 2.6 for oil and filter change. We're thinking we're gonna be a little bit close to the 3.1 mark because oil is so cold and this bike's been sitting for a little while. So I'm gonna just dump this second quart in here because we know it's gonna at least take 2. Now, while you're doing oil change, if you've had the bike for a while and you've done a few, great. Not sure why you're watching this video, but that's okay. Thanks for being here. If this is your first one on your bike, you should figure out what oil your dealer or whoever had the bike before you used. And if you can, use the same oil. Your gaskets in your motorcycle will get used to a certain type of oil, which I know that sounds crazy weird. It is kind of weird, but if you're swapping oils all the time, the molecular makeup of the oil is a little bit different. So your gaskets can find those differences for you and give you what's called an oil leak, which is not a good day. So it's worth it to just stick to the same oil unless you're like absolutely against that, then you can go ahead and swap. Just don't be swapping every single time. That's not good for it. We got 2 full quarts in there. I still don't see any in the sight glass. So we're gonna start to pour this third one, which it did say 2.6, so 2.6 makes sense. So we're gonna go to that half mark. But as I'm doing this the entire time, because I don't know, I'm gonna be watching the sight glass, so you might see me kind of pause for a little bit and check on my sight glass. And that's because I'm not sure exactly where we're gonna end up. And I want that sight glass right now. Yell at me if you want. I want it full to the top. So bring you guys in a little bit closer here. Okay, so as you can see there, we're about a third, maybe only a quarter full. That's what it looks like when I'm filling it. You're gonna see all that oil kind of come in, fill it up, then you'll see your bubbles start to reappear. That's taking us to about a half full. That is exactly where we're gonna want it. We're not there yet, so I'm gonna go a little bit more full than that for now. I'll explain why in 2 seconds. I'll fill that up. See our bubble come out. We're up to about 2/3. And then give it one more little tiny bit. All right, and our bubble settles out. We're dang near the top. So now we're gonna go ahead and stop there. All right, you guys missed my trick. Okay, what makes a perfect oil change? No oil spilled on the ground, specifically on the ground. If you have some oil on your engine case, that's okay. We can wipe all that off. It's once it gets to the ground, you don't have a perfect oil change anymore. It's not actually true, it's fine. You can have cat litter or whatever else. I have a giant bag in the garage. Whatever else you need to clean up your oil. But if you can do it without spilling oil on the ground, no drips, it makes your day so much nicer. So I showed you how to get it so it's not all over your hands. You always have a rag on hand in your other hand. So if it does get on your hands, you can immediately wipe it before you walk somewhere and drip it out of your hand. When you're transferring anything underneath with the oil pan and the collection pan, just have the pan underneath it. And then like I said, always have a rag either right next to it or in your other hand. You never have an issue. This is the only other spot you can have an issue. So you take your can that you just had, take your funnel, bring it up, watch for a drip, get a drip, immediately go to the can. You won't have any drips. We got our sight glass filled up, dang near the top. We're gonna take our fill cap, we're gonna put it back on, and then you guys are gonna find out why we filled to the top. And then I'll explain why you don't want your bike permanently filled all the way to the top. Make sure I have all the oil wiped off of here. Again, no drips on the floor. We got a perfect day so far. We're going to start the bike. Okay, that's gonna go ahead and, or that's gonna be ready to go. I'm gonna put you all back here. If you're still watching and you're listening, I definitely just spilled some oil on the ground, but I'm gonna claim that it is in fact a perfect oil change. You know, why have you guys watch the sight glass here while I run this thing? So you'll be able to see kind of what it's gonna do once we start this up. All right, we started that because, what do you know? Your oil pump doesn't run unless your engine is running. So if you're looking at that sight glass right now, you'll see that it's pretty much empty. You also see that it's actually kind of a little hard to tell what's going on in there because it is so empty. But from my experience, I know it's a little empty, so I'm not gonna add some more oil. When you're doing that first initial run, you are literally just running it long enough for that oil pump to get the oil. You don't want to run it till it warms up. You don't want to do anything else. If you let it run till it warms up, then your oil is gonna be a little warm. That's gonna mix, blah, blah, blah. Not good. You don't want to do that. Just run it long enough to get that oil pump to soak up or to grab up whatever it needs to, and immediately shut everything down. And then you can refill back up to, you're gonna wanna go to right about halfway up your sight glass. That's where you're gonna wanna end up. If you're out on the road, you can go half to 3/4. If you're on the track, you're gonna wanna be right around half. And if you get too much more than that, it can expand and blow out and whatnot while you're out there riding. Also depends on the temperature of the oil. It will actually change. So if you're somewhere where it's real cold, you might only want it to be just under half. So I'm gonna put a tiny bit more in there, and then we'll be good to go. And that should do it. Once again, we're gonna complete a perfect, what is this called? A perfect funnel transfer. Gonna pull that out, give it a little bit of whoppy wop, let it drip once, throw it in the bottle, and we're good to go. Then, where did I put it? Ugh. Losing my mind. It's right here on the bucket. We're good. Take our oil fill cap, put that in the top, tighten that up. There's also an O-ring on that. You want to inspect that. I didn't show you guys that, but definitely want to inspect that. Anytime you have a chance to look at software on the bike, software being your O-rings, your gaskets, all the bits and pieces that are technically wear parts are able to come out. So as I was just saying, sorry, anytime you have a chance to inspect any software on your bike or even your car or whatever other engine, internal combustion, anything that has software at all, anytime you have a gasket, O-ring, anytime you have a chance to inspect that, you should inspect it. It's worth it. It could save you a ton of time and money and pain in the end. So if you're doing an oil change on your bike, it's a perfect time to look at your bike's health. Take your engine oil and you put it in a little sample bottle and you ship it off to some company in wherever they made your bike, i.e. Japan, Germany, whatever. You say, hey, this is the oil I just collected from my motorcycle. This is the mileage, this is the VIN, this is the... I'm just kidding. You ain't gotta do any of that. But that magnet that's on the drain pan bolt, the color of the oil, the look of the oil, while it's draining out at first, you can just shine a flashlight in it and see just how much is actually in there. All of those things are gonna be your personal first signs of health and whatever else might be going on inside your engine without actually having to take the engine apart. Doing an oil change, it's your perfect time to figure all that out and take advantage of it while you get everything somewhat opened up. And then back to the O-rings and gaskets. If you have a problem with a gasket or an O-ring and it doesn't do its job anymore, i.e. seal fluid in and air out, or vice versa, you can catch that before you actually have an oil leak or before you have something worse, which would be an oil leak or an engine blow up out on a racetrack that once again causes everyone else to not be able to finish their track day because you spilled a bunch of oil everywhere. So sometimes things happen and there's nothing we can do about that. And everyone understands that, but any chance that you have, any opportunity you have to check on your stuff and make sure that to at least the best of your knowledge won't be a problem, please take it. And that way, when something does happen inevitably, maybe to you, maybe to someone else, you can be like, well, hey, we do all the maintenance, we checked everything, we know it's not anything that we did, it's just a fluke. That happens, everyone understands that. Half full oil pan, no oil around my drain plug, lap timer still on randomly. No oil on the ground, no oil on the ground on that side. No oil on the ground on this side. I can prove it, I promise. That's not oil. If you know the secret from before, that was my foot behind me due to me using a camera. So that's a wood chip. That spot we saw over there was already, sorry, that spot that we saw over there already, doesn't want to focus. Over there is not oil. This is not oil. That's the only oil that's in the ground, and that's in a pan. As far as getting rid of this, I don't know. Take it to your local auto parts store. Hopefully, usually AutoZone, O'Reilly, sometimes Napa, not as often, will take used engine oil. You just have to make sure there's no coolant in it, which if there's coolant in it, you have a different problem. So just take that to your local auto parts store or call your local landfill, dump station, whatever it might be, and they should be able to get those answers for you on where to get rid of that. Oil filters, also the auto parts store, don't just put them in your trash can. Also have our old oil or our used oil jugs. They're empty, but if you listen, there's just a little bit of oil left in there. So as you can see, this is my setup, wicked setup for draining those cans. Like I said, I'll leave them here for honestly a full day. Let that one drain out, come out, take the next one, put it back in. If you're asking why I actually have 8 here, it's because these are the new ones. I always keep a full oil change left up in my basket of parts so that I can, if I need to while I'm at the track, I can do an oil change. So I always have an oil filter and oil change on hand with me. And these are the new ones that I just bought. Never use your new ones if you're doing what I do here. always use the old ones so you don't have oil that's been sitting around for months or years at a time. Okay, the last step, once you get everything cleaned up, you get the bike all put back together. I didn't show you guys putting the belly pan back on. Got to put the belly pan back on, or whatever fairing part you have. We ran the bike once to get all that oil back up in. You run the bike again and then go out on a ride, whatever you want to do. When you're running right after an oil change, you don't want to be rev bombing it right off the bat. Once the oil gets warmed up and you put 50 miles on it, whatever, then you're fine, you're good to go. But don't just be out there like, all right, sweet, time to race, and go. Make sure you get that oil plenty warmed up, worked through all around all the gaskets, all the metal and every other part in your bike. That way it's set in and ready to go and you won't have any issues with it. After that, you're good to go. Once again, make sure you're doing oil changes often enough that no one's gonna be worried about it, depending on your scenario. Track bike, race bike, street bike. I'd say at least once a year. Definitely wanted to do it at least once a year. So whatever your bike might be, do an oil change at least once a year, and then more often as required based off what type of riding you do. All right, that's gonna finish this up. Thanks for joining us today. Once again, if you like the video, you like the channel, click the subscribe button below. Go check out our other videos, throw a like on the video. If you caught the secret in the video, leave a comment, oops, down on the video. Let me know that you guys caught that. If not, well, you have to go back and rewatch it. See if you can catch it. Thanks for being here. I know it's just an oil change. To some of you that might seem rudimentary, might seem like a basic skill, but to others of you that are watching and have been here this long, maybe it's not, maybe it's something new. Hopefully you guys gained a little bit of insight doing this. I cannot recommend more or too much or whatever you want to call it. These manuals, they will save you so much time, so much money, and so much just effort trying to go through Google. Everything is in here. Literally the oil specification, the oil type, the oil amount, torque specs for every single bolt. So it saves you so much time. You don't have to go through Google and then wonder, is Google correct or whatever else. Don't just throw it in the trash like most of us usually do with instructions. Those instructions are pretty good to have. Beyond that, that's all I got for oil changes. If you guys have any questions or there's any other maintenance you'd like to see, please let me know down in the comments. And if not, thanks for being here. We'll see you on our next video.